a presentation in Shipbuilders Creek Remediation Engineering Alternative Analysis. That's a mouthful. For people who come to these meetings and or watch them religiously at home, either live or on tape, time flies. 2 months ago on April 25th, or as I like to call it, BKM, which is before Keith Mortimer. Sorry, Keith. Had to call you out, right? Barton Judas, Aaron Ryan, came in, and I think with Art Patron from the sewer department, did a presentation showing the town board the conveyance pipe problem over on Shipbuilders Creek. And pictures were worth 1,000 words. I thought it was a pretty impressive presentation that night. The town board, if you go back to the tape of that, kind of gave the charge to Barton and LeJudas. Can you get back to us in 2 months with coming up with different options, engineering-wise, cost options, and if we can get those options by the beginning of July, if the town board is looking to move forward on that this year, we might be able to get in by the July 30th CFA deadline for grant application in New York State, because I think this project would qualify under the WQIP grant, which I think is the Water Quality Infrastructure.
Water Quality Improvement Program.
Thank you. I was just testing you. You passed. So that's a long preface by me, but without further ado, I'm going to hand the baton to Aaron Ryan from Barton LeJudas to give the presentation.
Great, thank you. And I'm here with my colleague as well, Theron Bisco. He's going to cover kind of more the stream side of things, and I'll cover more of the sewer side. And we're going to present to you our different alternatives we looked into on how to address this problem out there. So I'll just briefly cover kind of the background, and then we'll dive into our 4 alternatives. So can you guys see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So as you remember, Shipbuilders Creek runs along 5 Mile Line Road. It has a 15-inch sewer pipe that crosses it in this approximate location. That pipe is exposed. The concrete encasement around it has become damaged, so it's definitely susceptible to further problems if we continue to let it remain as is. There is also an 8-inch sewer pipe that crosses from 5 Mile Line Road across the creek and then back again, and both of those meet at a manhole that is really in the banks of the creek, and if erosion continues, could potentially be compromised. So we definitely want to address that before it becomes too critical. So the 4 different alternatives that we looked into on how to address that included in-place sewer rehab, so that would be lining the existing pipes that are out there with a localized stream restoration, which Theron will get into the details on, and that would be located in kind of the general project area circled in red. We also looked into the same lining alternatives with a more comprehensive stream restoration, so that would be looking at repairing the stream from culvert to culvert, which are marked in those red lines. Third, we looked into realigning the existing sewer, seeing if we could put in new infrastructure to better protect what needs to happen rather than repair what's currently out there. That would be paired with the localized stream restoration, same as alternative 1. And then lastly, we looked into potentially relocating that 8-inch sewer to run along 5 Mile Line Road rather than cross the stream twice. And that would be paired with more localized stream bank stabilization, really just protecting the existing 15-inch pipe infrastructure that's out there and would remain. And then we'll get into kind of a discussion on the different options and our recommendations regarding those. So diving right into alternative number 1, as I mentioned, this would include CIPP lining, that's lining the pipe. With that would be 150 feet of that 15-inch pipe and 385 feet of the 8-inch pipe, and that covers both of those 2 sections of pipe I mentioned. We would pair that with encasing the pipe in concrete where it is within the stream limits for further protection of that. And then it would also be paired with some stream restoration as well. And the next slide has some figures showing that. So I'll explain that more on that slide. So our draft costs that we've estimated would be about $150,000 for sewer, $530,000 for stream, so a total for this option would be $670,000. So as I mentioned, as you can see here on the left-hand side, we have the profiles showing the lining of the pipes. We would also propose to line that existing manhole that would remain kind of in the bank of the stream. It was in pretty good condition, but lining it just to be on the cautious side. So this alternative would provide protections of that existing 8-inch sewer by having some riprap along that bank and some other rock protections as well, and I'll let Theron kind of explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. So this particular option on the stream side looks at raising the bed of the stream by a little bit, but we're limited between 5 Mile Line and Lindsay Circle by the existing culverts that pass the stream under those two roadways. In our stream survey, as part of this portion of the work, we had Costage, our sub, go out and gather some elevations on those culverts, and we did find that there's really only 3 feet of elevation change between the two road culverts, which is pretty limiting. So this option looks to alleviate some of the stress on the stream banks in an area that's more closely related to the sewer work. So we're estimating about 650 feet, so that goes upstream and downstream of the sewer to make sure that we can tie into the stream at different locations that we consider to be a little more stable. So to be eligible for WQIP funding, we're looking at pairing both harder engineered approaches to protect infrastructure, and that would be like rock riprap or revetment with regrading a channel bench so we would have some flood capacity and created as part of the design, and then also replacement plantings for anything that's disturbed. Some of the options may allow us to use wood structures, but we wouldn't really propose those in the vicinity of the sewer line just for longevity reasons. Some of the rock that you see in the channel is really just something that we'd import to get bed features that are part of the natural stream system. Right now, most of the sediment in the stream bottom is very, very fine silt and sand. It's susceptible to erosion, which is part of the reason we have a channel out there that's incised and cutting into the sewer line locations.
Yeah, so specifically, like this option would protect those the pipes with both the concrete encasement, because as Theron said, we can't really raise that bed too much because we are limited with those culverts. So we wouldn't be able to get the required cover over that pipe. So the concrete encasement would protect against that, and then we'd also have that additional riprap along the banks where that 8-inch runs parallel to the sewer in this location. And then we'd also have a rock revetment near where the manhole is. And Theron, you were explaining that that's almost like a rock wall kind of a structure?
That'd be more of a stacked rock wall because with the manhole still being in the same location, we would be building pretty close to it. We can't realign the stream too far with this option because we're limited lengthwise. So this isn't your placed or dumped rock. It's more of a stacked wall that's really embedded within the stream bottom, so the footers of the wall are deeper than what you would expect the stream to be.
So for permitting aspects on this alternative, since the infrastructure that is currently out there would be remaining, we often have no problems getting the permitting for the concrete encasement around this type of pipe. I've worked on similar projects where we've been able to get those permits no problem. So with the infrastructure being existing, that shouldn't be too problematic if we were to pursue this alternative. On the funding side, Theron, you were saying that the WQIP grant program that we would be pursuing is a non-point source program, so it's really meant to prevent pollution in the streamway from things like erosion and getting silt and sediment and stuff in there. And it's not necessarily directly meant to treat point sources, and that would be what we would consider like a sewer. If that pipe broke, that would be a point source of pollution into the stream. So if we were to pursue funding, we would include the sewer work with the hopes that it would be included as part of the larger project, but we can't guarantee that they would fund that piece. So that's something to consider when we're looking at the costs between the different options, that the stream work of it will 100%, if awarded the grant, would be fundable, but we can't guarantee the sewer work. It would have to see what DEC says when they're reviewing that.
Yeah, I think it's important to add that sometimes we do see critical infrastructure relocation and protection be awarded funding, but DC is pretty careful not to award what they consider non-point source pollution funding to a true infrastructure project. So there's a fine line there, and you have to make a case that the infrastructure protection or relocation is critical to the success of the non-point source project.
So I think there's a case that could be made there for that. A couple other implications regarding this alternative, because it is lining of the manholes. Obviously, there is the stream work that would be a little bit intrusive, but from the sewer side of things, it would be the least intrusive alternative. And as I already said, we would be repairing existing infrastructure, so likely the easiest permitting alternative. So moving on to alternative number 2, this would include the same lining and concrete encasement as alternative number 1, but the stream work is a little bit more comprehensive. So the costs for that match that. So this option, we're looking at around a $1 million, $90,000 ticket for this. So what that would buy you, as I went over the lining option, but it really would be more comprehensive on the stream side, so I'll let Theron speak to that.
Sure. So this option looks at the extent of the stream between 5 Mile Line and Lindsay Circle. As we walked that earlier this spring, there's significant erosion on many of the stream banks there, including some old culverts and roadway crossings that were left in place that were likely there as part of access prior to residential development. In an effort to sort of mitigate that issue along the entire section of stream, a project could be conceived for the entire length. So it's approximately 17 to 1,800 linear feet of stream channel restoration. The benefit to this type of project is that we actually would gain quite a bit of cover over the pipe system. So we can design it in such a way, because we have that length, that we can get a foot, 2 feet of cover in that range, still not the 3 feet that DEC would allow, but we're pretty certain now that we know the inputs of those culverts that the 3 feet is really out of question. This uses far more green approaches. It's more grading and establishing new floodplain, which we think would alleviate some potential flooding issues in the area as well. Filling out some of the older eroded sections of the channel with material that's excavated for the new alignment. We'd want to keep this in a fairly narrow corridor, so for this concept we specified a corridor that's no more than 60 feet wide for the stream meanders, so that we're not impacting backyards and other residential areas that are currently being used. There's some areas where we're close to doing that, but we think that we can address that by putting in some other protective features or more dense plantings to offset any impacts that might be occurring there. But this avoids using a lot of larger rock structures and in-stream structures, and really relies more on capturing a stream dimension in connection to the floodplain that's essentially more natural and less disturbed by development.
And with this alternative, the protection that it would provide for the sewer, because we would be kind of realigning it and how it meanders, would actually shift the creek itself away from the sewer infrastructure. So we'd be moving away from it here where that 8-inch runs along the bank, so it wouldn't be within the bank as much, and same where that existing manhole is, would now be kind of off of the stream, as it would be shifted more to the west side. So that it would provide, additional protections, that the infrastructure would be far away from not far away, but it would be further away from the stream. So permitting would be generally similar aspect on the sewer side of things, but I think you had mentioned, Theron, that on the stream side it potentially might be a little bit easier, as DEC likes to see the green work more than the rock placement in the stream.
Yeah, we've noticed in recent years that we have to essentially make a case for using more engineered protection measures and stream channel restoration. Usually it's offset by implementing other green features, and we tend to get a lot of, sort of, during the permit process requests from DEC to implement habitat and vegetative enhancement features. This option alleviates some of that risk in the permitting phase of them adding or requesting additional design features, essentially. The other part of this is because we're coming into a category, essentially branching into two different categories of the WQIP program, you're eligible for a far higher project cap as well. So for a multi-project or multi-type of project category, in this case, bank restoration and then stream corridor restoration, we're also reconnecting some of the floodplains as part of the design process. The maximum grant award is $4 million for this year. There's also the possibility, because we're implementing this restoration approach, that more of the sewer work would be considered as part of the project, and it may end up being less of a cost to the town because of that, because more of it can be captured by the grant award.
So I think that covers everything for that alternative. Moving on to alternative 3. So this was the one where we looked and said to reroute the 15-inch sewer from its current location to slightly upstream to try to buy a little bit more of that cover, and would also include the same localized stream restoration that alternative 1 looked at. So because this does involve more sewer work and new pipe, that cost is a little bit more, so we're looking at a total project cost for this alternative of $920,000. So this is the plan and profile for that alternative. We're just showing the sewer work on this, as the stream work is the same as alternative 1, so to make it a little bit more clear for you. So currently that 15-inch pipe crosses on this alignment, and this is that location of that manhole that's right on the bank. So we would propose under this alternative to reroute it slightly upstream, cross there, and have a new manhole, which would be, as you can see, located off of the banks of the stream, so wouldn't have to worry about any erosion on that side. Unfortunately, because there is only the 3 feet of elevation difference between the 2 culverts, we really weren't able to buy much more cover with this alignment, as we had potentially thought we might in the beginning. So this is going to really have the same kind of look as if we had lined those pipes. It's going to be the pipe jutting out of the bottom of the stream a little bit, encased in concrete. So it doesn't really buy much additional benefit on the pipe side of things. However, we are moving the manhole further off of the stream, and we would actually also propose to demo that the existing manhole and replace it with a new one further downstream and again off of the alignment of the creek. So the manholes would be better protected, but the new sewer pipe would kind of have the same concerns as the existing one. Also, because it is a new pipe that would be going in, we would have to, during the permitting process of that, get a variance from DEC that we would not have the 3 feet of cover over that pipe, so that could definitely potentially be challenging to get. I haven't personally seen a project like that, so I can't speak to if they would be amenable to that or not. Also on the funding side of things, again, at this point not fully clear on if the WQIP grant program would fund that new sewer pipe or not. So definitely some concerns with the feasibility of this alternative. One other item I just wanted to add as well is there are existing easements in this area, but because this is new pipe on a slightly different alignment, would just want to confirm that we're still within that zone. So moving on to alternative number 4, this would be relocating that 8-inch sewer pipe out to 5 Mile Line Road, and then would include stabilizing the banks near the existing 15-inch sewer, which would be lined and encased in concrete, similarly to the other alternatives. So the cost for this alternative for the sewer side is pretty extensive at $780,000. The stream side is much less, for a total of $950,000, And I'll get into why that sewer cost is so high. Let me take a look at this profile. So we were checking to see if this would even be a feasible option, as there's 2 houses on 5 Mile Line Road that currently have laterals that go out the back of their houses to that existing pipe. So those would have to be rerouted if we were going to abandon that 8-inch. So we got the elevations of those laterals and actually found that they have enough elevation change to be able to connect to a potential new 8-inch sewer main out on the street. And the reason for that is the existing 8-inch pipe comes into this manhole and then goes over across the creek. This existing manhole is 13 feet deep, which is relatively deep for sewer. So that is why we would be able to easily connect those other laterals. We'd have enough grade. But because it is so deep, that means that it would be a approximately 15-foot deep trench along the side of the road, and the excavation costs would be pretty extensive for that. So that is kind of why this alternative is a little bit more costly. Other elements to that is, unfortunately, the stretch to where we would be connecting is 409 feet long, and you have to have a manhole every 400 feet. So we'd have to have an extra manhole in there as well, which wouldn't be a problem, but just a little bit of an added cost. One other thing I want to note on potential difficulties on installing this is there is already existing storm sewer and water main along this side of the road that we would have to contend with. DEC requires that horizontal separation between water and sewer is 10 feet, and that vertical separation is 18 inches. I have seen in the past, if our sewer pipe is deep enough, that they'll allow a variance. If we're much deeper than the water main, we might have to be 10 feet away from it. But we are kind of getting close to that road, and it is a county road, so there could be implications on not sure if we'd be able to put the sewer in the road or not. So definitely some potential concerns there as well, but something that would have to be looked into further during the design phase. And then on the stream side of things, as I mentioned, it would be simple stabilization. If you want to touch on that more, Theron?
With the realignment of the lines and relocation or elimination of the 8-inch, we would be looking at a more limited stream restoration or protection reach in this case, where we would really only focus on protecting the existing stream banks and the infrastructure to remain in place. And we wanted to provide this option as like a lower cost stream protection approach. A lot less likely to be funded by a grant, but still an option if the town were not to get a grant award, that you could still come back and do something to protect the sewer where it exists right now. So this is a very short section. Essentially, we're protecting some of the more susceptible banks to erosion, and we're regrading some of the insides of the stream beds to provide a little more floodplain connection during higher flow events. And that helps to alleviate some of the stresses on those outer banks when we get a big storm event. Because the 15-inch is still there, it's still perched within the stream bed, the only thing we can really do to protect it is to raise the grade locally at that location. So this approach with the stream itself would essentially create like an at-grade weir just downstream of the 15-inch line. It would raise the bed grade locally to make sure that we at least have a stream bed that's even with the top of the line or top of the encasement. In the long term, it kind of pushes the issue downstream, or doesn't really alleviate any other erosion issues beyond the sewer area. So it's really more of we think more like a midterm restoration approach. If this line were to be replaced long time from now, something could be looked at in the future for the more comprehensive stream restoration design. But this would really just focus on protecting the infrastructure that's there. Speaking to the grant, it's highly unlikely that DC would really see this as a fundable project in terms of scale. It's not to say that we couldn't apply for a WQFE grant for the stream portion of the project, but we at BNL just don't think it will be a competitive project. It may not be worth putting the effort into that application. So the 4 alternatives,
are laid out here with their costs. As we had said, alternative 2 has the highest price tag, but could potentially be the most fundable project, and could potentially be the least actual cost to the town. I think alternative 3, I would recommend against going with that alternative, as it does have that higher price tag with putting that new infrastructure in there, but doesn't really provide that much more benefit than just lining the existing pipes that are out there. Alternative 4 definitely has the added benefit of getting those 8-inch sewers out completely out of the creek and out into the right-of-way, but there could definitely be some potential challenges in getting that to happen, and would likely have to be something that the town would have to fund themselves, as there aren't much funding opportunities there. We don't see that as a hugely, with great potential for success for that application. So that kind of leads us to alternatives 1 and 2. And I think both will provide a much better solution than what's currently out there, provide protection for the infrastructure for the foreseeable future. It kind of comes down to what the town is thinking a little bit on their priorities for costs and the feasibility for grant funding and things like that. So we're open to have a discussion on any of that if you guys want, or if you want to have an offline discussion, that works as well.
I have a question.
Yep.
The first and second option.
Yep.
There's less sewer cost, and you said it's not likely that the sewer cost would be included in the grant, or it's less likely that that part of the funding could be comprehended. Is that correct?
Yeah, go for it.
Yes, yeah, so it's less likely that the sewer cost would be accepted under alternative 1. We found that they try to limit how much money you use from that grant source on actual infrastructure unless it falls within one of the very specific infrastructure categories that they've allotted. So those are generally like treatment plant upgrades. They do allow things for like culvert replacements and things like that they assume will reduce some erosion within the stream channel. So it's very limited on terms like infrastructure spending and with this grant source. But parts of it could be funded if we could make the case that this needs to happen for the stream restoration to happen. That's kind of the trade-off. So we don't know what percentage of the sewer work would actually be accepted, and it maybe come down to a little bit of a negotiation with the grant agency to figure that out in the end. For this particular grant, the town's match requirement is 25% of the award amount.
Yes.
So that might be up in the air as well. I will say in terms of the cost, we assumed for developing these costs, design, permitting, all that analysis and engineering would be next year. Construction would be 2026. So we did allow for some escalation in costs as we've seen over a number of years now.
Mm-hmm. So the alternative 2, the stream cost is a lot more. It's like not quite double, almost double. But that one has the opportunity for more of a grant or greater funding potential. So what would you envision, like, best case of cost to the town would be for alternative 1 and 2? Say that the grant is maxed out in both options, because one's 1 million, one's up to 4 million. What can we expect the cost to the town to be? And if we consider alternative 2, saying it's a more expensive option, but it could ultimately be less if you get more grant funding, and if that grant funding doesn't come through, can you change your mind and switch back to alternative 1?
I'm going to speak to the grant award period first because I think that might be critical. So the grants are usually awarded winter time, later in the year, so you wouldn't know until November, December, January timeframe. So up to that point, assuming you haven't progressed with like an engineering design and there's no cost sunk into it, you could switch your mind. You could change your mind completely and go, I want to pursue this alternative because it's going to be less to the town. You know, it's, so the match amount, let's say, can you go back to the slide that has alternative display costs, Sarah?
Yeah. Which one?
1 and 2. So, your worst case, if DC said, we're not gonna pay for any of these sewer costs, because in this case, it's lining, which I think we could make the case for, because Shipbuilders Creek, the watershed as a whole, is impaired for nutrients, phosphorus, and coliforms. So, not that we know that there's a sewer leak or anything contributing to that, but we can say we're preventing that pollutant source from potentially occurring in the future for this section of exposed line. But worst case, you're looking at a little bit less than $1 million in stream costs. So your match amount for that portion, again, the hard math, it's maybe a $250,000 plus the stream work, so that's what, 400? But it would be less than that because it's 25% of the grant award. So for the other option, if you want to just alternative one, assuming that they would award all the stream work as a restoration project, hard math, so that might be like a $300,000.
So 132.5 plus 150, is that 25%?
That sounds right, actually.
282, 282.5. Which one would you recommend?
From a grant funding standpoint, I think alternative 2 is more competitive as a project in DC's eyes. Now that the trade-off of that is more property owners involved, potential for more easement concerns, which WQIP does not pay for land acquisition or easements. We know that there's sewer easements down through there and there's drainage easements, and a lot of those are already mapped, and most of the work is within those areas. But you would still be at risk of landowner approval for any other impacts. So there's trade-offs and risks to both. I think that alternative 2, from a stream standpoint, is far more competitive as a project. I think it goes farther to the goals of DEC and eliminating non-point source pollution. We're addressing far more eroding stream banks. We're more than doubling the length that's being addressed within the watershed. That's definitely the more fundable project. From the sewer standpoint, they're similar. I'm not sure that there's removing some of the infrastructure or better protecting some of the infrastructure has a long-term objective for the town that we don't know that it's less likely to become impacted in the future. I don't want to
I
prioritize
don't know if I did the math correct. You're probably better at fast math than me. The difference between 1 and 2 is about $100,000-ish, maybe, because of the higher grant. If I did that right?
It's about right. It's in
On the assumption that we would get full award on both of them. And as we know, that's a big assumption.
I don't have that history and experience, so. Okay.
Patty, do you have any questions or comments at this point?
I do not.
Okay. Jenny, do you have any questions or comments at this point?
No, and, well, maybe. These are the estimate that we have for alternate 1 and 2. What if they're the unexpected that would cost more or something like that? Did we already factor into it, just in case?
Yeah, so we did actually. We, for both the sewer and the stream work, we had assumed a pretty typical concept level contingency. So it's in the range of 25 to 30% of the costs on the construction side. And that would account for any other unknown utility issues we might run into, design changes requested by DEC, anything that's unforeseen. The design costs for the grant, I believe, are capped at 20%. And it's 20% of, I think, the total project cost. I think we assumed 25 in our estimate just to be safe in case there were to be some unforeseen change. And then on top of that, we assumed at least 2 years of escalation as well. So this is a fairly conservative cost estimate in our mind. But as we've seen over the last few years, we get bids that come back, they're all over the place. And it's a matter of getting the right contractor to do the work in that time window.
So, Jenny, anything else? Because, first of all, I got to say, and I said at the beginning, April 25th, he came in here with I think Rick Canale was here too, our chief plant operator, and presented something that I've known about for 4.5 years. It was one of the first things I saw when I became supervisor was an incident that happened out there at Shipbuilders. So it's been a problem for a while. It needs to be addressed. I want to commend Aaron and Theron because on April 25th we said, listen, can you get back to us in 2 months so the board has a chance to look at these options, and if we want to move forward on one of them, we also obviously would want to do it most likely going for the WQIP grant. And we appreciate that deadline is July 30th, and wanted to make sure, since Barton and Judas would probably lead the charge on that you had time to apply for it. Now, with that being said, in the fluid nature of the world, a lot has happened since April 25th when you were here. And unfortunately, Art and Rick are not here tonight, so we can't really get their opinion tonight. We'll have to circle back next week to get our department heads in the sewer plant, their opinion. I appreciate, Jen, you asked what their opinion was, Aaron and Theron. We want to hear your opinion. We also want to hear what our sewer experts that are employed by the town have to say. 2, we're knee-deep, waist-deep in budget season right now for 2025. And of the 14 departments, the one department that is really up there as far as expense in 2025 is sewer. And Paul, I think when we had our sewer meeting the other day, the first one with the liaison, Patty Cataldi, you, me, and Art and Rick, this project was not factored into it.
No, this project is not included in the budget.
Okay. So another factor, not that I'm going to empty the barrel on this one, is that we, Josh Artuzo, myself, several of us went out to Gene O'Connell Associates in May. They're a firm that we have engaged to help us with grants, and the strategic decision was made that the town was going to go for one CFA grant application this year, and that was for Phase 2 of Sandbar Park, which is on this agenda tonight. Shame on me, I should have remembered at that time that, oh, geez, a month ago, on April 25th, Theron and Aaron were in here, and we gave them a charge to come back and show us something by July 1st. I've talked to Art and Rick about that. I'm not saying that we wouldn't apply for a second CFA grant, because number one, I don't think you would have Gene O'Connell Associates now be entered into the workload on that. They're working with us on Sandbar Park Phase 2. It would be all Barton and LaJudas. There's a lot of moving parts. So next week, I'm going to circle the wagons at the town level, Aaron and Theron, and we will keep in communication with you. We'll get with Art and Rick. We'll get with Paul, our finance director. And I would like to think by the end of next week, which is Friday the 12th, we will give you direction on which way we're going to go. The town board is not meeting again formally until Thursday the 18th. So if there are any resolutions that have to be tied to a grant application by July 30th, they would have to happen at that meeting. So I will have to have some offline one-on-one conversations with the board members as we get information from Art and Rick and their input and Paul's input on this situation, in this potential project for this year, applying for grant that would affect the 2025 budget. And the last thing I will say is that one of our board members is not here tonight. So one of the things I'm going to do for Councilman Cahill is I'm going to ask him that before we talk next week, I'd like him to watch what is essentially now about a 40-minute part of this board meeting, from the beginning of your presentation through this Q&A and my long monologue to end it. So I want him, all of us heard it, we were here for it. He needs to go and hear it so we can have an intelligent conversation and get his opinion on this too. So, a lot of stuff got to happen between Wednesday, July 3rd, and what I would like to think is the end of business, Friday, July 12th. Is Friday, July 12th, in your opinion, if there is a decision the board wants to go forward with one of these and apply for the grant commensurate with one of these that you've shown, does that give you enough time?
Yes.
Yes, that would give us enough time because we will have essentially everything pulled together on our end by that point. The costs, it would just be a matter of getting the town side pulled together.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You guys did what we asked you to do on April 25th, and I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for having us.